Hi guys, it's Brooke here. I have a super quick favor to ask. When you have a moment, please take just a second to give this podcast a 5-star review. This will help me to continue the podcast and continue to bring these resources to the community. Thank you so much for that 5-star review.
I'd been treating children who were on the spectrum, and I had observed some very specific characteristics in the blood analysis with the kids who are on the spectrum. And I noticed that my son did not have those characteristics. And I felt very hopeful that one day he would come out of this difficult phase he was in, and he did. And now he's going to graduate from high school, top of his class with honors, and go to college next year. But in the journey to serving kids on the spectrum and kids with other disorders and adults, but especially to understand my son, I was really motivated to find a way to communicate or understand what he was going through. And I ended up developing some special formulas to analyze blood work that I found correlated well with different thinking styles that kids had and a tendency to feel isolated or the need to use stimming to calm down an overstimulated brain. And so this began a whole series of discoveries that I made using mathematical formulas to analyze typical blood work to help gain insight and offer personalized care, especially to children on the spectrum.
Hey there, it's Brooke, and welcome to Finding Hope on the Spectrum, where I have heart-to-heart conversations with parents, professionals, and autistic individuals sharing personal insight and life experiences. Together, we dive deep into supports, programs, and stories that offer inspiration, insight, and most importantly, hope for the neurodiverse community. Before we begin with today's topic, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to this podcast. And if you know someone who this would be helpful for, please pass it along. Remember to always stay curious, be kind, and have an open heart. Okay, well, I am really excited to get this conversation started today, and we have an exceptional guest on, Dr. Hedayat. I'm going to introduce him and share a little bit more about his background. We met years ago. Actually, I don't know if you remember how we met, but I actually met you at a conference when I was pregnant with my 14-year-old, and you were presenting on how to reduce your chances of having a child with ADHD and autism, like a mother's conference, and that's how I met you. And then you were able to support some of our clients at TAG. And so it was many years, and it was so great to connect again and learn more about what you're doing now. So I'm excited to have you share. So before we get into our topic, I'm going to go ahead and share a little bit more. So we have Dr. Hedayat, a Stanford-trained medical doctor and leading expert in integrative and developmental medicine. With roots in pediatric critical care, he brings deep expertise in complex multi-system conditions and has served as director of critical care and integrative medicine, where he developed a truly collaborative, whole-person approach to healing. His training includes studying Endo-Biogenic, you're going to have to correct me on that one, in Paris under Dr. Jean-Claude Lapraz, and he is now one of the field's foremost authorities with 4 books and multiple research publications. Over 15 years as a medical director, he has created holistic programs around the world and carries forward the legacy of personal self-integration after training with its developer, Dr. Harvey Grady. Consulted across more than a dozen countries, he brings cultural and religious sensitivity to every family he serves, drawing from a wide range of modalities, from conventional medicine to plant therapies, oxygen therapy, PEMF, IV nutrition, and mind-body approaches. So welcome, Dr. Hedayat.
Thanks, Brooke. It's great to be with you again.
Wonderful. Well, let's just jump right in. You have such an extensive background, as I just shared, and are so passionate about your work. Can you share just a little bit more about your journey and what inspired you to create Origin Health?
Well, my journey starts with the fact that both of my parents are in medicine, but they came from overseas and they always maintained an interest in natural health and seasonal eating. So when I grew up, I just thought it was natural that you would start with a holistic approach, and only when that was not working would you go up to a standard medical approach. Now, I went to medical school and I've been blessed with 4 kids, and my third child, my second son, was misdiagnosed as having autism while we were living in San Diego. He definitely had some developmental issues. He couldn't speak by the time he was 3. He just kept repeating words. He had a lot of intense, sometimes violent outbursts, and he was really struggling and suffering. Now, I had been working in this field of endobiogeny already for a few years, and I had been treating children who were on the spectrum. And I had observed some very specific characteristics in the blood analysis with the kids who are on the spectrum. And I noticed that my son did not have those characteristics. And I felt very hopeful that one day he would come out of this difficult phase he was in, and he did. And now he's going to graduate from high school, top of his class with honors, and go to college next year. But in the journey to serving kids on the spectrum and kids with other disorders and adults, but especially to understand my son, I was really motivated to find a way to communicate or understand what he was going through. And I ended up developing some special formulas to analyze blood work that I found correlated well with different thinking styles that kids had, and a tendency to feel isolated or the need to use stimming to calm down an overstimulated brain. And so this began a whole series of discoveries that I made using mathematical formulas to analyze typical blood work to help gain insight and offer personalized care, especially to children on the spectrum.
Amazing. And that's incredible. I mean, it's such a specific way of looking at things. And I'm excited for you to share more about all of the things you're doing today now based on that background. So let's talk about that. What is this term Endo-Biogeny? I mean, I know I'm saying it wrong. If you could say it the right way, that would be helpful. Let's talk more about that.
All right. It's called Endo-Biogeny. It's an approach to medicine that was developed in France by a genius doctor based in Paris. And his approach was to look at life in all the parts of the body as being integrated in a web of relationships. And by understanding how different hormones and different parts of the nervous system and organs interact with each other, he was able to find specific patterns that are related to different disorders. And then once he was able to identify those patterns, he was able to identify natural treatments that could work to holistically balance those patterns of imbalance. Now, endobiogeny has 3 parts. One is listening to the patient. We're deep listeners, and we take in everything. For example, in the case of families where a child's on the spectrum, we want to know about everything about that child, starting with how the parents were, what their health history was, what the prenatal history was, what the prenatal exposure was, how was the birth, how did things go after birth. Little things that moms just notice and know, we pay attention to and take seriously. So listening to the patient or their parent is the foundation of everything we do. The second is a careful examination to look for clues about how the body is functioning and where it might be imbalanced. And then the third part is to analyze the blood work. Now, this French doctor, Dr. Durfour, developed a way to analyze blood work to use special formulas that could uncover hidden imbalances that you can't see with the casual glance of standard blood work. So this is what endobiogeny is about. And once we have listened and examined the patient and done the special evaluation of the blood work with a system called Gemma, Gemma, then we're able to offer a highly personalized approach to treatment. And the approach is always family-centered or patient-centered. because for me, everyone in my practice is a partner. Well, I'm their partner on their healing journey. And the recommendations we make, they need to be not only personalized to who you are and the struggles you're facing, but they also need to be personalized to what you're willing to do, the types of changes in diet or lifestyle or different interventions that work for you or work for the family.
Yeah, I love that. And I just love that you take so much time to listen to the family and the parents and, really honor what the parents have experienced. And it really supports their parental instincts and expertise in their children. And I'm a big proponent of that. And I think that's so important to hear that through this process, that's an integral part of your approach. And I'm sure the parents appreciate it, and it really helps them to be in tune with their child even more so as they're noticing these things.
Yeah. My original training was in pediatrics, and in the first 3 months, maybe in the first 3 weeks of my training, probably one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was always believe the mother. And I've taken that with me throughout my practice.
Yeah, that's huge. It's huge. Just speaking from personal experience with my own daughter's journey, it goes a long way. And when that doesn't happen, it also has a deep impact on parents. So it can be traumatizing. So I love that part of it. And now when we met before, you had mentioned the body is a system and everything needs to run at the same speed. And that was really interesting to me. I'd love for you to share a little bit more about what that means in practice.
Sure. We can think about the body kind of like a band or an orchestra. If the band is playing music, which like dance music, then all the members of the band need to be playing at the same rhythm so the people listening can get into the groove and move their bodies. And if the band is playing some serenade or night music, something very calming and soft, well, one person can't be banging on the drums like there's no tomorrow. Everyone's got to be playing at the same pitch, the same pace, the same loudness. The same thing is true in the body. It's not even a case of what is the absolute or quote unquote normal level of activity. What's more important than that is how all the parts work together. And this is, from my perspective, what the definition of health is. It's all the parts working together in the right way at the right time for what your body needs. As some people naturally run a little bit higher, a little hotter. Some people run a little slower and a little cooler. And we need to respect what is the optimal pace for each individual person.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I imagine that when you're out of balance, that's when we see a lot of issues and disruption in the body.
That's right. When you look at children on the spectrum who have sensory integration issues, or anybody with sensory integration issues, this is a really good example of the body not running with the same internal rhythm. Because the sensory integration issue, your serotonin levels in the brain are higher than other neurotransmitters. And what this means is you're taking in information faster than another part of your brain can organize it. So you see the rhythm is off. And people who have this imbalance where they're more sensitive to what's going on than they can organize and feel like they're in control of understanding their environment, they get overwhelmed. And the opposite is also a problem, because if you have low serotonin and high dopamine, which means you're undersensitive to your environment, but then you're overthinking and you're stuck over and over again on the same little path of thinking, that's also an imbalance. So we want to look for these imbalances and bring all the different parts into a holistic sense of working together. And that affects how we approach the remedies that we recommend, because we can't just try to fix one imbalance. We need to fix many imbalances together.
I bet it's a quite complex process Yeah, that's really well said, the way you described that. And I imagine that it takes time to really kind of peel back the layers of the imbalances, if it's maybe the best way to say it. But
Well,
I
steady wins the
imagine,
race, as we were saying, is
yeah.
definitely the case here, but in two ways, because there's a methodical approach that I take, and the more I listen to somebody and the more I hear the different information, it's like I'm playing it's like a three-dimensional chess game or a three-dimensional puzzle that I'm building to see how everything is related. But steady wins the race also means for me that when I approach healing somebody, especially if they have a chronic imbalance, that we don't want to bring them a catastrophic success. Because if somebody has had low sensory input for all their life, for example, as a child, you don't want to turn on that faucet and cause all that sensory information to start flooding in. Because everything else down the line, like organizing the information, remembering the information, coordinating your brain and your body, if all of that hasn't been prepared to handle this new inflow of information, you're just going to create new problems down the line. Or if you start to pull toxins out and you haven't opened up the pathways for detoxification to clear out those toxins, the toxins are just going to go into a new organ and cause a new problem. So
Yeah.
steady wins the race means being patient and letting all the parts of the body come back into alignment with each other and start functioning and trusting each other.
Wow. How do you do that? We're going to talk about it. That's fascinating work that you're doing, and that you can identify it too is also very interesting to me, that you have figured this out. So I'm excited to have you share more, but it makes a lot of sense. And I agree, why you would really have to take a slow approach, and that eventually you'll get to that finish line, or at least you'll make that long-term progress. But I don't know if we are ever at a finish line in life, but we're always on a journey. That's what I like to think about it.
It's more like a spiral for me. It's about bringing us up to a higher level of function and reaching our potential as we go up the mountain of our possibility in life.
Oh, I love that. That could be a quote right there on your website. I love it. Okay, well, let's talk about the detoxing. You just mentioned that gentle detoxing and kind of restoring the balance and helping the body handle stress. And how do you actually do that? How do you approach that with your patients?
Well, in endobiogeny, we talk about two things that have to happen sequentially, one after the other. So before detoxification, there's something called drainage. And anyone who's had a garden or anyone who's had a house that wasn't built on a hill knows how important drainage is. And this idea of drainage is just important in your body as it is in your house or any other building. So there are a number of organs that are made to detoxify your body. The liver is the most important. The gallbladder is another one, the intestines, the kidneys, the lungs, and the skin is a backup detox organ too. And it's the biggest organ in your body by surface area, so we don't want to forget about the skin. But these detoxification organs, they can have trouble draining the toxins that they pulled out of the blood. So the first place we want to start is through a concept called drainage. And drainage means that we support each organ to not be congested. So it's like if you have a stuffy nose and you want to be able to smell all the smells around you again, you don't just start shoving smells up your nose. You need to reduce the drainage and open up those airways. And we're just doing the same thing with the liver, the kidney, the gallbladder, and all these other organs. So first we start with this drainage, which is the gentle opening of the natural flow and ability. And then when we see signs that the drainage is working well, then we start a gentle detoxification.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the gentle detox, let's talk a little bit more about how that works.
Sure.
I know we talked about detoxing in the field, for years, but this is kind of, I had not heard of this approach that you had shared when we met as well. So I'd love to share just a bit of, what does that mean, a gentle detox?
Well, a gentle detoxification is going to be working with different plants and other interventions that I'll mention that naturally absorb toxins and help move them out. So maybe the simplest and safest place to start is with something called clay. So there's people might have seen bentonite clay, which is a white clay. There's a green clay called illite clay, named after Illinois, where I'm in, state I'm in. There's also brown clay. There's various colors of clay. And these clays are medicinally prepared for internal use. And what they do is they have an egg crate type of function. So it's like, imagine two upside down egg crates and there's a space inside for an egg. But here, because the clay is electrically charged naturally, it attracts the toxins in and it traps it inside of its little cage. And for that reason, that's a gentle detox because it's working in the intestines, and whatever it's pulled out, it's going to mix in with the stool, and then the toxins would be evacuated when the child has a stool.
Right.
Now, a lot of the plants that we talk about that do this gentle drainage or opening up of the organs, they also naturally stimulate the enzymes that help that organ detoxify. So normally for example, if we wanted to use a plant like birch, you could use the birch leaf or the birch bark, or you could use something called gemotherapy, where you take the buds of the birch flower before they blossomed, and they make a special remedy out of it that's very gentle and well tolerated by children. And birch will help drain and detoxify in the liver and the kidney. So it's a 2-for-1. And actually, birch also helps the immune system. It helps the leaky gut and the intestines. So it's actually working in a lot of places at once. And this is why I like working with plants, because they work in so many places to create a type of integrated healing response.
Yeah. Well, and they're so natural too. It's incredible.
Yeah.
You can use plants in this way.
Yes.
Imagine it's just so much more better beneficial for the body than the harsher approaches.
Yes, because, what I say is that living organisms need a living treatment. And plants are alive and intelligent. And what we call a healing compound in a plant was created because the plant needed to heal itself from something else in its environment that was attacking it.
Wow.
And so life, it continues inside of another living being. That's the power of plants. Now, we talk about gentle detoxification, but what would be aggressive detoxification? That would be using chelator like calcium, EDTA, or other molecules which are going to pull heavy metals out of certain tissues, the brain, the bone, other places. Now, what's happening is it's pulling these toxins into the bloodstream. And where does it go from there? It goes to those organs we talked about, the liver, the kidney, the gallbladder. And if they're not ready to handle all those extra toxins, the toxins are going to go back into circulation. So if you're pulling a heavy metal or a fungal toxin out of your child's bones with a chelator,
Right.
and the liver is not ready to handle that, maybe it's going to go in the brain, and now it's going to cause another problem. That's why, for me, the gentle and slow approach is the most effective, not because we can't be muscular or strong with our approach, but it's because we don't want to upset the balance. We want the whole body to reawaken to its own internal healing capabilities.
Right. That makes so much sense. And I imagine that on the patient side, it's much more gentle experience to go through.
Yeah, but gentle doesn't mean ineffective. You
Right.
know, I remember a case when a mother brought a child to me who was pretty far on the spectrum. I mean, not speaking, not making eye contact, a lot of stimming, and the child was maybe 5 or 6. And I just, at the end of the consultation, I just started with two simple things. The green clay, which we mixed in some water and had the child drink, and some chewable digestive enzymes. In 2 weeks, she sent me an email and said he started making eye contact. You see, that gentle doesn't mean ineffective or it takes a while to see the result.
Right.
It just means
Right.
we're respecting the body and where it's at, and we're gentle treatments work with the body, and they're really saying, "Hi, I'm here to help, and I know
Yeah.
you're in charge." And plants, especially because of the own intelligence they have as living organisms, a lot of the ways that they come into work is not by forcing something to happen, but by facilitating, by being a helper, by saying, "Oh, I see you're a liver and you're really good at detox. Can I help you do that?" And that's how they come in. They're
Right.
working with you.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. And I would you say that you have then less side effects from
Definitely.
this approach?
Yeah, less side effects.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Especially because
Incredible.
in endobiogeny, when we use herbs, we combine them in synergistic ways. And so a few plants combined in the right combination together can have a deep impact at a very low dose. Because again, if you try to use a plant like a drug and you're using mega doses to force something to happen, just because it's a natural product doesn't mean it's going to have a natural effect. We want the natural product to have a natural effect, which means combining them into synergies and using the lowest dose possible to get the job done.
Yeah. Amazing. Incredible. I got the chills when you were talking about the plants in that way. I mean, it's what a beautiful synergy. I mean, it's a great relationship, and to understand the plants to that level and to be able to use them in such a healing way it's incredible. And I'm so glad to have you on to share this. I think it's important information for people to know about. And so from this perspective, then how do you identify the root cause when there's so many different systems that seem to be interconnected?
Well, because endobiogeny is a whole person approach to medicine, we've identified these unique patterns that are specific to why each individual disorder or imbalance occurs. So that gives us a good starting point. Now, there's two ways that we think about it. There's a pattern of imbalance that makes you susceptible to developing a problem. And then there's a different set of imbalances once you have the problem, because that's what keeps you in that disease state. So if we go back to what you mentioned, Brooke, about how we met all those years ago, the reason I was able to give a lecture about reducing the risk of giving birth to a child with autism or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder was because there are telltale imbalances that the child develops in utero while they're still growing inside their mother. And there are certain conditions or genetic tendencies that a mother has, like allergies, for example, which could increase the risk of their child inheriting the genetic tendency for allergies or other immune imbalance conditions. And so knowing this and knowing the science and what we've discovered, we can start to offer preventative approaches to help the baby's immune system develop in a healthy and balanced way before they're born, and to keep the mother's immune system balanced while she is still pregnant. So once the child is born, for example, and we identify what the condition is, then we focus on a group of 3 different factors which affect every disease. One is the nervous system, the second are hormones, and the third are these detoxification organs. So every disease has a specific imbalance of different parts of the nervous system, different hormones in the body, and a different set of these detoxification glands. And that's where we start.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's very methodical in your approach. And so I'm excited to talk about this topic that you shared with me when we met about cosmobiology. And this was a whole new thing to me, but I'm so curious about it. And what I love about podcasting is we get to learn new things and talk about things. And so let's talk about what cosmobiology is, and kind of just have you share what it is and how our brains and bodies interact with the Earth's electromagnetic field.
Yeah. Well, cosmobiology it's a real science, and there's tons of literature, lots of research on this. Cosmobiology is understanding how cosmic forces, so forces outside of the Earth, affect our human biology. And when you describe it like this, it kind of sounds woo-woo. But I just want to remind everyone that we are on a blue marble, which is floating in space, and we're rotating and we're revolving around our sun. And the sun is giving off huge amounts of electromagnetic energy. Because remember, light is a form of electromagnetic energy. And so besides the light that we can see, the sun is also giving off other types of electromagnetic energy and other intense energies. And just for example, a few days ago, before we recorded this podcast, we had one of the strongest solar flares that have been recorded on record, and definitely for this year. You might have heard of people seeing the northern lights as far south as Alabama. Well, that is an example of cosmobiology, because those are cosmic events. The electromagnetic and other levels of energy that come from the sun affect us. Well, why does it affect us? Because our body runs like a gigantic electromagnetic battery or a Tesla coil. I mean, if you think about it, for example, if you want to, we can measure your brain waves, because that's called an electroencephalogram, because we're measuring the electricity in your brain. And we can measure the electricity in your heart when we do an EKG study. And we can measure the electricity that causes your muscles to move. So to do an MRI, the M in MRI is for magnetic, because every hydrogen atom that is in the water that fills up our body is a tiny little magnet. It's magnetized, and an MRI works to release this magnetic energy and create a picture so you can see with magnets. It's really incredible when you think about it. So we're an electromagnetic being at one level, and we're swimming in a sea of electromagnetic output. And not only does the sun give off all this electromagnetic energy, but so does the moon. Because what is the light of the moon? It's just the light of the sun that's reflected off of the moon. So for example, studies have shown that if you look at 100-year period of human history, you can time the onset of major wars or conflicts in the world based on solar flare activity, because it agitates people. And many, many studies have shown, for example, that people are more likely to show up in the emergency room around the full moon because of animal bites than at any other time of the month. And people are more likely to call a suicide hotline to ask for help around the full moon than the new moon. And there's all sorts of other correlations that have been found. So the last part of the cosmobiology is the Earth part, because not only are we electromagnetic, but so is the Earth. And again, when you just think about the hard science, what is in the middle of the Earth? It's a gigantic molten ball of iron. And iron is a metal. And when you rotate a metal, you create a gigantic electromagnetic field. So there are literally these rivers of molten iron flowing through the earth. And as the earth is spinning around, it's creating its own energy. And so the sun gives off energy, the earth absorbs it, then the earth releases it. I did research with a university in Eastern Europe that specializes in cosmobiology. And we found that older adults were more likely to have a heart attack within 2 to 3 days of the earth giving off a surge of electromagnetic energy. And we found all sorts of other correlations with different fluctuations of earth energy and how people feel and their health issues. So this stuff is real. And I became fascinated first with something called circadian rhythms, which is your daily rhythm, because we have a day rhythm that helps us stay alert, and we have a night rhythm, which helps us slow down and then go to sleep. And at night while we sleep is the time for us to heal. And actually, most of our detoxification occurs at night when we're sleeping. And anyone who's raised a child on the spectrum or with other neurodevelopmental issues know that it's quite common for them to have a disruption in their day-night cycles. And then we have seasonal changes and we have yearly changes. So I became fascinated with this when I was still in my pediatric training. And I asked, in those days, there was no Google. I had to ask the library to order hundreds of articles. Somebody would photocopy another library, send it to us. Like 3 weeks later, I'd get a packet. And I was reading all these articles to understand basically how cosmobiology is working. And this is really important when we talk about neurodevelopmental orders, especially with kids on the autism spectrum.
This show is brought to you by Therapeutic Approach to Growth. Therapeutic Approach to Growth helps families with relationship and behavioral needs. Their holistic programs are individualized to honor and respect each family and their autistic son or daughter's sense of self through programs such as relationship development intervention, naturalistic ABA, and animal-assisted services. If you're finding yourself frustrated or discouraged with your current behavioral programs and would like to see more long-term meaningful growth for you and your family, then contact TAG today at www.tag4growth, that's TAGFORGROWTH.com, to learn more about how to schedule a consultation or how they can offer you the help your family needs, whether in person, remotely, or in a school setting. Again, that's www.tag4growth.com.
Fascinating. Well, I know I as you were talking about the moon, I was thinking I used to have these clients, these brothers that I worked with years ago, and every time there was a full moon, the behaviors increased and the challenges increased, and it was always a couple of us, one or two of us usually with the boys, and we would always look at each other and go, is it a full moon? And sure enough, consistently every month we could predict that it was a full moon based on the increase in their challenges. And so, I definitely have seen it in the practice and find it so interesting as well. And so, what are kind of some of the early signs that someone's system is out of sync, and how can they begin to bring it back into balance when you're thinking about these factors?
Well, I would say that the most obvious one would be the day-night cycle. So not just talking about children on the spectrum, but anyone. If somebody, for example, is tired all afternoon and then they get a second wind after the sunset, no matter what time of the year. So if it's a sunset at 4:30 in the winter or it's a sunset at 8 p.m. at night, usually within an hour after the sunset, they get a second wind and then they can't, they're wired again. That would be a type of rhythm imbalance. Night owls would be another example of that. People who are, again, sleepier in the morning and they're more energetic later in the day, that would be another example. But I think when you go up to a bigger scale, what I look for and I ask my patients about, or the parents of my patients about, is, does your child, for example, have flare-ups or agitations where you cannot point to anything that happened today or yesterday that's tied to it. That is a classic example of a cosmo-biologic imbalance. And that means that the pineal gland, which is it's the master gland of all the hormones. And this pineal gland is where melatonin is made. A lot of people have heard of melatonin to help you sleep at night. Maybe they take a melatonin gummy to help them settle down. But melatonin is more than helping you get to sleep. The pineal gland, which makes this melatonin hormone, is the great translator of light and rhythm. It's what helps us balance our internal rhythms of life with the external rhythms of the whole universe that we live in. And it is literally your third eye because it gets the signals from your two eyes and it interprets the light signals into different messages to the body to say it's daytime, act like this, it's nighttime, act like this, or it's winter, slow down, it's summer, create a lot of energy and have fun. The pineal gland is the master regulator of all these rhythms. And so when the pineal gland is not functioning properly, you have what looks like inexplicable flare-ups or crises or agitations, but it's really because there was either a solar flare or a specific lunar phase, the phase of the moon, or a geomagnetic imbalance, or it even could be weather imbalances because humidity. Some people are sensitive to humidity, or to lightning, which is just another form of electromagnetic activity. So all of these things can play a role. The other thing would be people who have food sensitivities or like food allergies, like let's say they feel some brain fog or an ache in their knee, or they feel swollen or inflamed if they eat certain foods. A lot of times they'll come to me and they'll say, doctor, I know I have some food sensitivities, but I don't know what it is because sometimes I eat corn, like we go out and it's taco night and I'm fine. And sometimes on Taco Tuesdays, I feel terrible the next day. Well, it's probably not the corn. It's this cosmo-biologic imbalance that's thrown off your system.
So what can you do about that?
Well,
$1 million question.
Yeah. In the search to understand and help my son, I ended up developing some mathematical formulas, analyzing some common and specialized blood work. And I found a way to identify people who are at risk of having this cosmobiologic sensitivity. And once we identify that, or just by the history, what I mentioned, the signs and symptoms, there are different treatments that I found, simple treatments that can be used to balance this. So for example, I developed a protocol using a special form of iodine called atomidine, atomidine, atomidine. I have no financial relationship with the company that makes it, called Heritage House. I just find that the way that the iodine is prepared in liquid form is really effective. And we can use this form of iodine in a pulsed dosing rhythm that I developed. So for example, you would start at 1 drop in a glass of water on day 1, so on the new moon. Then on day 2, you would add 2 drops, and on day 3, 3 drops, and then you'd go up and then go down, and then go up and you go down, and you use this method to basically reset the internal pacemaker in the pineal gland. And for younger children who can't handle that much iodine, there are other forms of iodine that can be used safely in this protocol.
And then do they eventually stop taking the iodine, or does that have to continue indefinitely?
It really depends, because what I found is the 2 organs that are the most sensitive to pineal imbalance are the adrenal gland and the thyroid. The adrenal gland makes hormones like cortisol, and the adrenals help with sprinting energy, like get up and go energy. And the thyroid, which makes hormones like T4 and T3, give you more of an all-day energy or a marathon energy, a lasting energy. And sometimes these organs, the adrenals and the thyroid, are inflamed or they're affected by fungal toxins because kids on the spectrum can have issues with fungal toxicity, for example. And until you clear those toxins and you reduce inflammation in those glands, they may not heal on their own. So starting with this pulsed iodine therapy or up and down treatment is the beginning of resetting the pacemaker, but then the individual hormonal glands also need to be addressed. And if you can do all that trifecta, all three of them, you should be able to get off the iodine, usually within a year.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's a relatively short period of time.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, let's talk about your remedies. I want to make sure we have plenty of time to talk about it. So that's also fascinating. And these supplements that you created with neurodivergent individuals in mind. So let's have you share just a little bit more about them and what inspired that focus.
Sure. Well, I've had the honor and the privilege of making custom remedies for the kids in my practice for almost 20 years. And I love making custom remedies that are very bespoke and specific just for one person. But there's only so many people you can help with this approach. And I want to help as many people as possible because not everyone can work with me or they're happy with who they're working with, but they want more of this holistic support to help their child. So what I've done is I've taken the most effective remedies that I've observed over the last 2 decades or so, and combine them together in the most synergistic and effective combinations. And that's the basis for this product line called Endo Logica, like Endo-Biogenic.
Endo Logica, that word I can say.
Because it's about the logic and the wisdom within us, and we're really waking up our own inner healing wisdom with these products. So the first thing about the Endo-Logical line is that everything is completely natural. There's no additives, there's no preservatives, there's none of the typical allergens you'd be worried about. It's gluten-free, dairy-free, corn-free, nut-free, soy-free. But then to take it a step further, we've created 10-time concentrates. So we've taken all the naturally derived extracts of the plants and we've concentrated them. So instead of taking a dose like a teaspoon, the child is going to take a few drops. So it's a lot easier to administer. It's also helpful for kids who, even if they're older, but they don't tolerate swallowing pills, because it's a liquid, you could either put it in the mouth or you could put it in a small amount of water. You could add it to food and give it. The third advantage is that we've created what might be one of the first liposomal tincture blends on the market. Now, there's lots of products on the market that have a liposomal preparation, but nothing quite like this. So let me explain what a liposomal preparation is. Liposomal means fat body. And basically, we've taken sunflower oil and we have added it to the tincture to a small amount. And using a special process, we wrap all of the healing compounds from the plants. Each one is wrapped in a tiny little fat body. Now, the reason this is important is that this type of fat from sunflowers can be absorbed while it's still in your mouth or under your tongue. And it can be absorbed in your stomach, even if you have leaky gut or you have SIBO or other types of gut imbalances. This product will be easily absorbed. Even if you don't have enough digestive enzymes, it will naturally go up through the lymphatic system in the intestines and get right into the bloodstream and start healing.
Incredible. I know that is really significant in the supplement world. I feel like I've heard of that before, just that it is harder for our bodies to always absorb all the supplements, and that you've created this approach, especially with the neurodivergent population that has other challenges, making it challenging to absorb the supplements.
Exactly.
So that's fantastic. Okay. And so let's talk about, how you tailor the treatments for your patients. I know you mentioned that you used to, or you probably are still providing the individualized care for your individual patients, but how does that work for the masses now with this approach?
Well, the Endo-Logical line takes a three-level approach to healing, which is the foundation of all the healing we do in endobiogeny. The first is that it offers symptomatic relief for quick results. The second is we're selecting plants which help with that gentle drainage and detoxification that we mentioned earlier. And the third are the plants that address the root cause imbalance that we've identified for different disorders. So, for example, I have a product I formulated called Catavance. And this product is supportive for people who have weak or underperforming adrenal glands. And so instead of making a product that's just for allergies or just for learning or just for sports performance, behind all of these issues is how this adrenal gland works, how the hormone cortisol functions, how your healing and stress recovery hormones are working. And so this formulation is designed to address all those disorders. So you don't have to give your child 5 different treatments, one for the allergies, one for the digestion, one for the eczema, one for the asthma, one for the concentration and focus. The same product is going to address all those issues because it's working at the root cause. And so I've selected the most dynamic and effective plants that I found to be helpful across all my years of practice and put them together in one bottle so it can have a profound impact.
Yeah. And I know when we met, you shared your kind of assessment. I think would it be an evaluation, the process that you determine what the recommendations will be for the patients. And it was quite extensive and also very user-friendly, which I loved about that. I'd love to have you just share about it because, yes, it was very easy to read and understand. And even though it was very specific and technical, that you also made it so user-friendly.
Oh, thanks. Well, you're referring to our system called Gemma, Gemma. And Gemma is a software that I helped develop. And it is how we do an analysis of the blood work to uncover those hidden imbalances within every person. And I train doctors, naturopaths, and other healthcare providers to study endobiogeny and then learn how to get the most out of the Gemma system. But really, any doctor or naturopath who's used to working with functional lab testing or has some training in functional medicine can order these tests. And the way that I've written the algorithms, the code for interpreting it, it gives a clear series of recommendations to the prescriber who ordered the test to guide them. Basically, it's like recreating my thinking and how I would take care of you. But now all other doctors can use the same approach and have this guidance to have a conversation with you about the best products to use.
It's fantastic. And it also included other recommendations as well, correct? Share a little bit more about I can't remember what they were now, but I remember it was pretty extensive.
Yeah. So if somebody is on medication, we'll have some recommendations on how you can modify the dose of the medication. All of the herbal recommendations are broken down into the root cause herbs and those gentle drainage and detoxification herbs. And then we also have dietary recommendations and lifestyle recommendations. So, for example, with just one simple blood test that your doctor orders every year on a child on the spectrum, for example, called the complete blood count, a CBC, that doctor could run 5 or 6 different tests in our testing system on the same sample of blood. And we can see if your child has a tendency towards anxiety and which hormonal or inflammatory factors are affecting that anxiety tendency. We can look at the tendency of these detox organs to be congested or if they need drainage. and that's called the spasophilia test. And with that test, there's all sorts of diets that we can recommend, like starting the first bite of your meal with something bitter or sour, or when to use calcium-rich foods or magnesium-rich foods. And we provide a list of all the superfoods that you can offer to get those benefits naturally. And then there's lifestyle interventions that are recommended as well.
Incredible. It's incredible. I mean, it's very exciting that this is becoming available and is so trainable to physicians. It really allows more people to access all of the amazing expertise that you have over the years.
Yeah, I'm excited to share with them.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's see. Are there any precautions or potential interactions listeners should know about if they're taking medications or other treatments as they're going through this process?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, plants are real healing agents, and they're working in the same neighborhood as drugs, but they're not working in the same way. So we take safety really seriously at Endo Logic. And so with our pharmacists and our researchers, we've listed the most common interactions which might occur between an herb that is found in one of our formulations and typical medications. So you can safely choose one of our formulations or not use it if you're already on a certain medication. But in general, for children on the spectrum, I actually cannot think of a medication that they would typically be on that would interfere with our formulations, except in the rare case of certain antibiotics.
Okay.
But that'll be listed on the website.
Yeah.
under
Okay.
precaution. Yeah.
That's great. And I know when we met, we talked about the MTHFR mutation and support for that, and that you had shared some powerful steps like kale smoothies that families could participate in having their children drink, and other habits. I'd love for you to share just that's a big one in our field and talked about quite a bit. And I think it'd be great to have you share a little bit more about just even some of those practical things that families can do that are, just simple.
Yeah. Simple is best. I think a lot of your listeners are familiar with the different types of MTHFR mutations and how impactful they can be. And maybe they are also familiar with methylated supplements and the concept of methylation. What we've observed over time is when you're using a methylated supplement, like let's say methyl B12 or methylfolate, is that sometime between 6 months and a year of constant use of these methylators, children seem to get pretty irritable, and it can actually make things worse after a while. And then you need to take a break, and then you need to try to reintroduce it. But the best source of natural methylation are leafy green vegetables. So the kale, the Swiss chard, parsley, cilantro, basil, any of these types of green leafy herbs are what you want to encourage. And yeah, you could make a smoothie. What I like to do actually, I like kale a lot personally. But one of the things I like to do to shake it up with kale is just drizzle a little bit of olive oil and put it in the dehydrator or the oven or the air fryer and just let it get really crispy and then have it as a snack. And it still has a lot of those healing properties that we want to get from kale.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I'm going to try that. I just got a new air fryer, so I've been wanting to try the dehydration option.
Yeah.
So I love that. Okay, great. Well, let's talk about resources. I know you have a lot of resources and that you could recommend, and I want you to have a chance to share any books or research or practices that you would recommend to help people understand this integrative approach to health.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, there's a company I started that manages the supplements, the Endo Logic supplements, and the testing service, Gemma. This company is called SBRG, and the website is systemsbrg.com. And there are some patient-facing pages that explain a little bit more about Gemma. There's a lot of free material that people can download, like my research articles or a periodical we have that is informative for doctors. But, every issue of our periodical called Living Systems has a section on recipes and healthy eating. In fact, there's a whole article on seasonal eating and how to deal with these cosmo-biologic rhythms. So there's a number of resources there. We have a website called learnendobiogeny.com, and we can provide the link to that.
Yep.
And on our website, systemsbrg.com, we also have a Find a Practitioner page, which will be up soon. And people can find somebody trained in endobiogeny. And endologica.com, people can directly purchase the supplements and learn more about them and about endobiogeny on that website. That's probably the best website for parents to start out is Endo-Logica, because that has the most patient-friendly and parent-friendly language.
Okay, fantastic. And we will make sure to put all of that in our show notes as well, so that that's easy to find.
And if somebody wants a consultation with me or an analysis of their child's treatment plan, they can go to originbodymind.com and book an appointment.
Great. Perfect. And that's important to mention because you are still seeing patients directly, even though you're offering this new supplement and program.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, well, I just would love to have you share, if there is just one last thing you could leave our listeners with, what would it be?
I'd actually like to leave your listeners with a thought about the parents, because the children are, of course, so important. But if I've learned one thing over the years is we need to take care of the parents. And each of you heroes who is sacrificing so much to raise a child on the spectrum, you deserve care. You need a break. You need some time for yourself every day to replenish and recharge and find that strength again to keep going and to manage everything you have to manage in your life. So don't forget about yourself as a care provider, because you can't care for others if you don't care for yourself.
Right. I love it. It's incredible. A beautiful way to end. And it's so true and so important. And it's needed to be said louder and louder for our families out there. And I just appreciate all of this fantastic information, Dr. Hedayat. It was wonderful. So great to connect again. And I just love hearing what you're doing now. And so glad we had a chance to have this conversation. So thank you so much for being here today.
It was a pleasure to be with you, Brooke. Thanks for reaching out.
I'm dancing on the edge again. The wind is calling my name. I'm dancing on the edge again. This time I'm not looking back, babe. You can change me, you can tell me down. I'll leave echoes in every place I find. I'll break the molds with rebels mind. I'm a hurricane of free born mind.
The information provided on this podcast is for general informational purposes only. The content shared is based on the experiences, opinions, and perspectives of the hosts and their guests and should not be construed as medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment recommendations. The discussions and topics covered are intended to foster understanding and awareness of autism therapies, but are not a substitute for professional medical guidance. Before making any decisions regarding therapies or treatments, we strongly encourage you to consult with a qualified healthcare provider who can provide personalized recommendations based on your unique circumstances. By listening to this podcast, you acknowledge and agree that the hosts, guests, and producers are not responsible for any consequences, damages, or outcomes arising from the use or application of any information during the show.